Morning all. The Gibraltar Masters is finished. Ivanchuk came first, Nigel Short came second. Hopefully let's see quite a few games from Gibraltar, maybe some Ivanchuk and Short games. There's one in particular where I was intrigued watching the live commentary by GM Simon Williams, aka Ginger GM. Very good website if you want to check out Ginger GM, and he does very good instructive videos. I think he's one of the nicest GM commentators, and he was the commentator for Gibraltar, and there's recorded videos of all the live commentary, which I'll put some of them in the links of the description of this video so you can check over his commentaries. So I really recommend Simon Williams. But here it seems there was a bout of over optimism, it seemed, for what actually occurred in the game. So there was a seemingly brilliant move played in this game, which had a sort of strategic backfire, which we've covered before. But this time, Ivanchuk White 2764, and his opponent Roiz, another GM, 2649. So the setting is set for a strategic backfire because we have the dreaded Slav defense. But note, even at this stage, the scene is set here on the dark squares for potential disaster in the Slav, quite often, especially this bishop. If it can't, that's another strategic issue. But the dark squares are a lurking strategic issue with the Slav, and this game kind of emphasises that underlying issue, which might come to the surface sometimes. Queen d3, a seemingly novel move. Sorry, it's a bit early. I should try and wake up more. A seemingly novel move from Vassily. Okay, Queen d3 protects the c pawn. It's got some logic to it. Not only protecting the c pawn, but also maybe e4 is supported. But actually, after knight bd7, Vassily just plays g3. Vassily is also nicknamed Chucky sometimes. So d takes c4, queen takes c4, bishop d6. So why is black captured on c4? Usually the point is that later either c5 or e5 will be the liberating break points for the black position. So liberating as in extending the scope of many of the pieces usually. See, if it was the e pawn, it would be extending a rook on the e file. Imagine a rook later there. If it was the c pawn, then maybe the c file later, and the bishop can sort of develop either on this diagonal or this diagonal. Okay, so these are the liberating break points, c5 and e5. So Vassily clamped down on the e5 break with bishop f4, and he doesn't mind accepting double pawns. And also what he's doing strategically is actually emphasizing that bind on the dark squares as well. So there's a dark square bind. The dark square protector has been removed, we could argue now. Well, that's technically true. So after castles, bishop g2, and you might think, well, Vassily's advantage isn't that much. One moment, please. Okay. So how do we assess this position? Well, black seems to be fairly solid. Okay, he's got some strategic issues lurking, and so you would think from a position with many strategic issues, a combination is also likely potentially to reveal them. So we're setting the scene for a strategic backfire in a way in this game. Queen d3, knight bd5. Okay, hitting the f4 pawn, which is just protected with e3. So a casual seeming move. b6. So this strategic problem is starting to be resolved. That's like the worst piece in black's position. Knight e5. You can imagine what a juicy knight that would be as well if a black pawn wasn't here to kick it later, but actually was here. You can imagine this could be a juicy knight. So bear that in mind. Bishop b7. So knight e4. So it doesn't mind a trade of knights. Queen e7, but now Vassily just castles. Rook ac8, as though c5 is going to be the liberating breakpoint now. So Vassily puts some pressure on c5 now. Knight e4 also does that, and he doesn't mind the exchange. Okay, so rook ac1, and now black takes on e4, protects h7 now with g6. Now here, this is the interesting moment in the game. Was this a blunder or not? Technically, Rybka is regarding this as a blunder. In this position, just to check the evaluation at this moment, technically, from a totally technical engine perspective, actually black is given as slightly favourable to black. So end it off. So Vassily seemingly played a casual move. He played a3. It has its uses. You know, if he can get in b4, he really will be clamping down on c5. Now, black played now f6. Now the problem with, say, knight c4, maybe one problem is bishop a6. Knight c4 was not played. Knight g4 runs into f5. Knight c3 seems illegal actually, because sorry, I'm sorry, the wrong knight. Sorry, knight c4, knight g4. So that leaves knight f3. Okay, the c6 pawn is adequately defended at the moment. So knight f3, as if everything's okay. Unfortunately, black produced a seemingly stunning tactical move, but in the process of this combination, what have we said about pawn moves and knight outposts next to them? If black's playing f5, what knight outposts is he giving white? f5 would be giving e5 and g5. Now that's independent of a brilliant combination or a brilliancy. Okay? I wonder if you can spot what black played next here, if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. But also, as well as thinking of the combination, bearing in mind the strategic backfire implications of the combination. Okay, so 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, black played knight takes f4. So a temporary piece sacrifice. The point is that after e takes, now the white bishop is trapped with f5. But look how that e5 square is now really juicy for the white knight. So this is the game continuation now, where black is actually given as technically better by Rybka, and it was at this point our esteemed Grandmaster Simon Williams was also very enthusiastic about black seizing this diagonal, indicating an early demise potentially for Vassily. So was he going to lose? Bishop takes c6, knight e5. But this is a special case where the ugly looking move f3 is actually quite effective if needed to block this seemingly dangerous diagonal. Okay, so bishop b7. And it's also the case that if this really is a major strategic trump card, the knight versus bishop, to get rid of exploitable white targets, it's useful to get rid of the rooks here. So this next move is designed to get rid of the rooks. Now with accurate play, I think this was an immediate blunder, lowering black's advantage. There's other moves technically better, like queen d6 here, but actually rook fd8 was played, and black now starts to go downhill. Once the rooks get exchanged off, the exploitability of white targets and king position seems to be rapidly diminishing. In fact, this king almost plays an aggressive role quite soon to be able to support h4, as we're about to see. It's quite an amusing thing what happens with the king once f3 is played. So one pair of rooks come off. Vassyly's keen to trade the other rooks off, get the rooks off, get this knight and bishop scenario where the trump cards, the imbalance which favours white, in other words, is clearly emphasised without too many distractions of other exploitable targets in the white position. So queen d8, rook c3, as though, you know, queen c1 next. So a battery on the c file. So queen d5 here is not He's not doing anything now because of f3. In fact, Queen d6 is first played. f3 anyway, blocking the diagonal straight off. The other rooks come off. So we see now it's not easy for black. And there's some waiting moves, some torture here. So Queen d8. The king now comes to g2. And now, more outrageously, it covers the h4 square away from the queen. So the queen can't come to h4. And now a bit of strangulation on the dark square. So even g5 potentially is clamped down on. So psychologically, Vassily's getting, I think, a psychological bear hug type position. Every strategic break from black has been locked down in this game. The combination seems to be suffering from a strategic backfire, because in playing f5, that juicy knight on e5 has emerged. So king g7, will it actually have practical implications though? Well, we're going to see this from the game. After queen c2, king f8, so some waiting moves now, as if nothing's happening. But now is the time when Vassily, he's playing for a win. He's playing for a win now. He plays a4. Okay. And black blunders again technically when checking with an engine. He shouldn't have played this. He plays a5. The problem with a5 is that this b6 pawn is potentially more vulnerable now in certain variations. In fact, immediately after b4, there's going to be a frontal attack now on the b pawn. Whilst with the pawn over on there, with its fellow next to it supporting it, it wouldn't have been such an issue. But here, there's a frontal attack, and you might think, big deal, that's not going to decide the game. But white's already got that really juicy knight, so the propensity to blunder now is increased. Queen c7, queen b5, strong move. Look at the queen and knight, nasty combination of forces here. And now, here comes the blunder. King f8. The 2649 is going down here. I wonder if you can spot Vassily's next move if I give you 10 seconds, starting from now. Okay. Queen takes b6. Look at that, practical implications of that knight. Tactics, follow strategy, follow strategic crush. You start making it difficult for the opponent to move, they're going to blunder. So that frontal attack on the b pawn, made possible by that a4 which provoked a5, and then b4. We had a frontal attack combined with already strong strategic trump card, that knight, has produced the winning of a pawn in this endgame, where it's difficult now for black. And actually after knight takes b6, I think I saw knight takes d5 on the relay, but it's not in this PGN. I think it was after knight d5 that black had resigned when I saw the relay for the game, unless that was just analysis. But anyway, the result here is 1-0. So I thought it was an interesting game because it seemed at one point this would have ended Vassily's winning run to be able to win the tournament. So this was in round 8. Let's have a quick overview and summary. So a seemingly brilliant move seemed to suffer because it gave a very juicy centralized knight. Black's playing for these liberating moves, but they're all extinguished, which can't be good psychologically to have your strategic breaks challenged at every point. So bishop f4, it doesn't mind about the double pawns, because the important thing is to bind that e5 square. Okay, black solving the queen's bishop issue. Now this knight e4 is very interesting as well. Okay, so queen e7. White's again tying down black on c5 at the moment. So tempting black, look, if he wants to play c5, he's going to have to get rid of this knight. So bishop takes e4. Slight weakness with g6 created. Now this seemingly, innocent move is tactically challenged now. After f6, the knight's only got 2 squares. Okay, as well as the f3, but these fell, it seems, miserably. Knight g4 especially to f5, knight c4, bishop a6, I think. So knight f3 is chosen, and I don't know if this was play acting as well, but actually Vassily was shaking his head at this point. I mean, maybe it was a blunder and he just fell onto this strategically winning position without really intending to. But this brilliant combination, in inverted commas, you know, comes at a major cost positionally. So that's the point. If you're going to play this brilliant combination, which involves pawn moves, think of that previous video where we looked at different pawn moves for white and the implied knight outposts, which are potential implications. And here it's clear, if black's going to play f5, then the e5 square is a major problem. Especially central knight outposts have such a big impact, because, you know, knights in the center are like octopuses. A knight here is hitting all these squares. Big octopus. So knight takes f4, e takes f4. We're really setting the scene for a huge e5 knight. Okay, and now technically, yeah, I think there's a window of opportunity with black with accurate play might actually be able to use this diagonal, but there's always f3 for white, which makes it a bit tricky. But what's even worse though now is that once, you know, the rooks come off, I think this was the inaccurate move, fd8. Here's a variation I'd looked at which maintains a small advantage for black, by the way. Queen d6. For some reason queen b3 is played, and then we have this kind of thing with queen d5. So if black can get a light square blockade out of it, that would be something. You know, even if you can just blockade c4 and have that bishop on d5, that would be quite good, very good. But that didn't happen. You know, this variation didn't happen. So instead, we have one pair of rooks coming off. Then this annoying rook c3 as well, with queen c1 a potential battery on the c file. So then the other rooks came off. No rooks, less exploitable targets for white. Even h4 is not exploitable. Now the king binds, helps the bind on g5 even, so that we've got a strangulating knight, a psychological grip on the board, as well as an actual grip. So a4 provoking a serious vulnerability now at a5. So this was another technical blunder. So with b6 weak, we've got two issues now for black to deal with in combination, which turns out to be too much now. This blunder Kf8, blundering a pawn, and then that's it. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.